So in this video, we are going to be talking about a really interesting topic that came up with one of my clients the other day, and it was voted on Instagram that it was the subject that everybody wanted to hear about. And this is how to tell the difference between a boundary and a wall. And usually this comes up in context, I don't know if this resonates for you, but with my clients, such as their friends telling them they're too picky or their standards are too high, which means then they worry whether they're setting boundaries or they're putting up walls, and their expectations are too high in order to keep them safe so they don't actually meet anybody. So within that context, I want to explore a little bit actually about what is a boundary and then what is the difference of a boundary and a wall. Because when it comes to love, if we have experienced disappointment and rejection and heartbreak, we want to create a safe space for us going forward in order to protect against any future hurt or mishaps. And we do this sometimes by putting rules in place, don't we? We kind of come up with little structures for ourselves, like, okay, I've learned from that, and now I've got my boundaries, now I know what to do. But there is a difference of creating a boundary, which is something that helps protect your self-love, your self-esteem, helps kind of keep you safe and happy. There is a difference between creating that and putting up a wall as a defense mechanism to keep everybody out. And it's up to us really to figure out what we're doing, so when we're ready we can create those healthy and happy relationships, but also, and I think this is really important, friendships, family relationships, relationship with colleagues and things like that. So this isn't just about romantic love. We need to apply this to kind of every area of our life. So what is the difference between a boundary and a wall? To quote, I think it was Mark Groves, he said that a boundary is ultimately showing somebody where the door is, and a wall ultimately keeps everybody out. So to explain a little bit more about that, boundaries are basically, they're ultimately about building connection. So I know sometimes we think about a boundary as a line in the sand, right? Of like what's okay and what's not okay. But actually a boundary is about showing somebody and teaching yourself how you want to be treated, how to love you in a way that feels good and comfortable for you and the other person. It's about building the best relationship you can. And it's an active process that involves looking at your intention, looking at communication, looking at self-love. And they're also flexible, and they will develop and shift and change over time depending on where we are in our life and what we need. So they're not rigid. They're not necessarily going to be a permanent rule. We need that degree of flexibility. So a boundary ultimately lets the good in and keeps the toxic or the bad out. But it ultimately is about self-love and creating good relationships, in a way that's going to make you feel good. A wall, on the other hand, is designed to keep everything out, the good and the bad. It's usually put up in reaction to being wounded and to being hurt, and when something has happened to us that we feel we need protecting against, out of the fear that it could happen again. So it's a bit of an emotional wall that we feel like is going to keep us safe from other people's actions. And through having these walls, we feel like we're going to be able to control what happens to us, don't we? We feel that's going to be the best way to keep us safe. And sometimes I think when trauma happens, when something happens, sometimes for a short period of time, maybe we do need those walls up. Maybe we do need actually to go into that survival mode. But the issue is when we want to stay there for a prolonged period of time, when we're in that space and we're not aware of it. And we actually think we're acting with boundaries and with self-love and things like that, but really it's coming from a place of fear. And actually that's a really good and quick way to explore this with yourself. Ask yourself, if you're creating a boundary and a wall, whether it's coming from a place of fear or it's coming from a place of self-love. Let's explain that a little bit more. Let's use an example. Let's say you were dating somebody and I'll use a romantic example. You're dating somebody and they really hurt you, or they ghosted you, or they acted like an arse. A boundary you would say, you know, at the moment, you know, it's best for you to take a little bit of time away from dating and focus on making yourself feel good so you can actually process what happened during that relationships. You know, you will be, and you perhaps are, open to meeting and trusting again down the line. And most importantly, you know now what kind of behaviour you're not going to tolerate going forward, and actually you know how you need to communicate and perhaps things you need to put in place to make sure it doesn't happen again. So that is coming from a place of growth, of self-love, but you've also learned, so you're going to put things in place so you protect yourself going forward and you teach other people how you want to be treated, right? A wall would be, in this scenario, that you tell yourself, you know, that you knew it was going to happen, you can't trust people, so it's better not to get attached. And actually you're going to stop dating completely until, and you could at this point say, I'm going to stop dating completely and just focus on myself until my perfect partner comes along. But actually that partner could, might have to, you know, reach an incredible amount of criteria before you'd even go there. You know, you might create a vision in your head of what a perfect partner or perfect love looks like, and until somebody hits all those boxes, which FYI they never will, obviously, you're not going to date, you're not going to keep yourself safe. Do you see what I mean? So that second one, that wall, is coming out of a place of fear, pushing people away, protection. So if we're thinking about you know, the context of your friends telling you you're too picky and your standards are too high, well, if that's what they're saying, have a little look actually about what you're accepting, what you're not. Are you dismissing everybody because they don't reach this kind of massive list of expectation and criteria you've got, which might not be realistic, and it's been created out of past relationships that have hurt you? Or actually, are you just pretty certain about, you know what you want and you know what's going to feel good? For example, you know, you're only going to speak to people on dating apps who actually bother to send you a proper message back. So it's looking at those kind of things and actually doing the deep work on yourself. But yeah, and a really nice way I like to look at it, because I know this whole jargon can be quite confusing, but let's say you've got a lovely garden that you're really proud of. You spent a long time nurturing your garden, so roses growing everywhere, you love relaxing in it. You know, let's say this metaphorical garden is actually like your self-love, your standards, you know, into your sort of self-esteem, right? If you didn't have anything around that garden and you let every sort of neighborhood dog come and poo on it, it would pretty much get ruined quite quickly, wouldn't it? That's the equivalent of having no standards. Sorry, that's the equivalent of having no boundaries even, you know, maybe standards. So there's nothing to protect your lovely garden, there's nothing to safeguard it. So your garden would quite quickly get shit. Then let's say you've got your lovely garden and actually you're going to put a 10-foot high wall around it so no neighborhood dog can get in it. Might seem like a good idea at the time, but actually, because nobody can access the garden, nobody can nurture it, can they? It means that the grass isn't going to get any sunlight, perhaps, so it will die. It means nobody can go prune those roses, which means that the garden will kind of wilt and eventually it will die, or it will get super overgrown, and we won't know what's going on there. So we don't want the wall either. That's the equivalent of having very, very rigid boundaries or building those walls that we're talking about. So what we want in this garden scenario is perhaps a little fence around it. Let's say a fence with a gate that you can give people the code to, and you can let in when you want, and you can show them where the door is. You know, it's going to keep your garden lovely. It means you can go in and out and prune all those roses. It means not everybody can just walk in whenever they want. And you keep your garden safe. So that is the equivalent of having a healthy boundary. What else do I want to say to you? So to figure out whether you've kind of got those walls, perhaps lack of boundaries, and also or whether you've actually building a healthy boundary, here are some signs of boundaries versus walls. So With a wall, you'll have a very difficult time trusting. You'll have very inflexible rules of what people must and mustn't do. You'll have very, very high expectations, but you perhaps will either communicate those expectations very aggressively and say, unless you do exactly this, this, and this, I'm not going to be with you. So it's more about control rather than communication and love. You might also, as part of that list, assume that everybody's going to meet your needs and your expectations, but you might not have even communicated what they are. You might be quite closed off, so reluctant to share anything vulnerable about yourself. You could be quite quick to cut people out of your life, and you find surface level relationships easier because there's not that depth there and you don't have to open up. Signs of healthy boundaries are things like you share personal information when it's appropriate and when it feels okay. You are assertive, you're happy to ask for what you want, you've got quite a clear idea of how you want to be treated, but also what your responsibility is within that. It's not just about them. And you've got a strong sense of what matters to you and what you need to feel happy, safe and loved. But you're also willing to compromise. You know, you're willing to meet people halfway. If somebody can't meet your bound, you know, if somebody perhaps crosses that boundary, you can communicate with them, or you can kind of rethink how important it is to you. You look at how it feels and things like that. So there's quite a lot of self-exploration that goes into that, because we understand that boundaries are an active thing. It's a bit more of a process rather than a rule. You know, it's not really one rule that works for everybody, and sadly, as my clients will tell you. So I hope that makes sense to you. Please comment or below if you have any questions, or drop me an email on caitlin@thecompatibilitycoach.co.uk if you've got any questions about working together. I did build up those walls for years and years and years and really struggled to let people in. So I know how emotionally overwhelming it can feel to start to think about taking those down, and it really should only be done in a safe environment. So brick by brick, we can take down the walls but replace them with something that feels just as safe for you, and really that work should be done with a coach or a therapist or something that feels supportive to you. So yes, I do have one-to-one spaces open at the moment, so please do let me know if you'd like to inquire about working together. Rate, subscribe, review, all that jazz. Follow me so I can keep putting out content for you, and I will speak to you guys soon. Bye.